Welcome to Seculo. Will Haynes in studio. My dad, Jay Seculo, is going to join us. We are starting to go through it ourselves, but the ACLJ front and center right involved in this. And of course, the breaking news is the appeals court has thrown out the massive nearly $500 million penalty against President Trump. And this was over, Will, what they were calling the overvaluation of properties,
right,
and all those things. You heard about us talking about this over and over and over again. But now there at least is some justice. Now, it doesn't mean it's over yet, but at least this step is concluded, and the ACLJ, as I said, front and center.
That's right. So this is the case that was before Judge Engeron, which, remember, the famous photo op that people made an Office meme out of because it was ridiculous. He allowed cameras in his courtroom to come take photos. And then he handed down, there was no jury, this was a bench trial, where he handed down a $400 million judgment, but with penalties and interest, puts it over $500 million penalty against President Trump. It also banned him and his family from running the business of the Trump organization. And this was Letitia James' civil fraud case. This was the case where she said that Mar-a-Lago and other assets were overvalued and able to get loans, and then that enriched the Trump organization. The Supreme Court, which is what the lowest court in New York is, handed down this huge penalty, unprecedented penalty against President Trump. Well, today, in an appeal at the New York Supreme Court Appellate Division, First Judicial Department, a 5-judge panel handed down an opinion which completely wipes out that $500 million penalty. They said it violated the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And right there, you see the opinion on the front page, who is listed as a party to it, because we filed in this case, making an argument that it's the American Center for Law and Justice. Remember, some of these things you may have even forgotten were still going on. These appeals of the lawfare perpetrated against President Trump when he was running for office.
Yeah, they've just been in the background.
We're still fighting, and we're still getting victories even today.
ACLJ champion reporting for duty, and I say it that way because without you guys, I could not bear the news that I'm hearing. You're fighting for decency worldwide.
Hey, Jordan. Hey, Jay. I just want to let you know that I've supported ACLJ for 30 years and continue today. Thank you for all that you do.
Yes, I'm a small monthly donor for several years. I love that you explain the law according to the Constitution and that you fight for everybody, the big guy and the little guy.
I can't think of how many times the ACLJs were working over Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's while the rest of us are on vacation. Is there any other organization in our country that would be fighting for these kinds of things?
This country, I believe, is in an emergency. You've said it, Jay, but we are being attacked in the legal realm. We need brilliant and dedicated attorneys for what ails us. Let's make sure the ACLJ has the armor it needs through our giving to fight for us. Please join our family of supporters. Have the peace of mind to face the new year boldly.
Welcome back to Seculo. My dad, Jay Seculo, is joining us right now. Will, let's give a very brief rundown of what just happened as this New York court has decided to wipe out nearly $500 million in penalties against President Trump, but also the ACLJ is directly involved. Dad, and I want to get your thoughts after this. We'll set this up, and then I want to get your thoughts, and again, how the ACLJ was involved more than we ever even could imagine, I feel like, in the decision-making process.
That's right. This was this case that Letitia James had brought against former President Trump at the time, running for president at the time as well, where she brought this civil fraud statute against the president, saying overvalued real estate and things of that nature to get better, more favorable terms with banks on loans, and therefore enriching himself that way and the organization. Today, a 5-judge panel with the New York Appellate Division, the Supreme Court Appellate Division, has thrown out that what was $400 million fine and penalty against him, which with interest was over $500 million. And your ACLJ was fighting front and center on this, even on the front of the opinion, as well as quoted and cited by one of the justices in the opinion as well. So we want to go to your dad, Jay Seculo. Now, what's your take on this? How big a deal is this that we're seeing it today?
Well, I think, first of all, it's very significant because it eliminated what was clearly an excessive fine. It violated the Eighth Amendment. What you and Will have been talking about in the first segment is correct. The ACLJ played a pivotal role here. We wrote a brief that argued that allowing that judgment to stand, that Letitia James brought this suit, that allowing it to stand would, in fact, violate the Constitution, would also inhibit free speech and political discourse. And what is, I think, very significant here is Judge Friedman, in his opinion, writes that it quotes, not just references our brief, but quotes our brief. We said the statute provides a license for the Attorney General to pursue anyone based on an alleged inaccuracy and regardless of whether anyone has been harmed, just as she did here. And then it said, by removing the inherent protections of traditional fraud law, Section 63 enables political opponents to be prosecuted under a regime of strict liability, regardless of any actual culpability or mental state. The mental state is intent to commit a civil fraud. So Judge Friedman cites our brief in the case, and I want to underscore the importance of this. When we talk about an amicus brief, some people say, well, what is that exactly? It's amicus stands for friend of the court. We had standing to file a brief in the case as a friend of the court, and our briefs as amicus briefs have been cited not only by appellate courts and federal appellate courts and state appellate courts, but we've been cited by the U.S. Supreme Court as an amicus. So this is a huge win. But the deterrent effect of political activity and investment in New York City, a lot of businesses left New York because of their concerns about what happened to President Trump. And these are not necessarily people that had any political axe to grind. It was just they were concerned about doing business in a state where they could do something like this. Now, there's going to be an appeal here to the next level. This was the appellate division, which is the intermediate appellate court. It will now go to the Court of Appeals. And I will assure everyone that's listening right now that the American Center for Law and Justice is going to be front and center. We spent a lot of time on this brief and to work it out. And the reality is this is a big win, but we need the next step here, which is two of the justices would have voted to dismiss the entire matter. And I think at the appeals court, at the next level, we're going to win that aspect too. But those fines are gone.
Well, and that's one thing I wanted to ask you about as well, knowing that the office of Letitia James will still try to make sure that this judgment against him, regardless of the fines being wiped out, stands. This was one of her key achievements as Attorney General of the state of New York. But as we look at that next level, knowing already that there are some of these justices in the appellate division that think that the entire charge should have been dismissed, and knowing that our rationale was used by one of those justices on this appellate division, does that give one more, gumption behind our fight as we take this forward, that it could be total vindication by even having this completely wiped from the books?
I think there's we have a real chance at that. I mean, I'm optimistic. I mean, first of all, getting those civil penalties, which were draconian to say the least, out of the way is a huge win. The next phase will be this injunction that they put in place, which puts some restrictions on how the Trump organization does business. You know, we've been involved in these cases from the outset, but I want to underscore something here, Logan, that you said right before the break, and that is, you look at the work of the American Center for Law and Justice, we're talking about 35 years of victory. Here's one where we're defending the Constitution of the United States and the President of the United States, and we are successful. And the reality is, what's at stake is the ability of American citizens to do business, to engage in free speech without this kind of retaliation. And the fact that our brief got cited is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I guess you're expecting it in the sense of you put a lot of hard work in it, but when you see it sort of up front and center, when you see not only ACLJ listed, but direct quotes and cites happening, you know that we are putting together a team that can really impact the world. And I think that's always something, Dad, we want to pitch, and always something I talk about here, which is I want to bring in the best of the best. We want to make sure we have the best lawyers. We want to make sure we have the best media broadcasting team because we can't do it without them. And if you don't have this level of success. And I think that's what proves when you have 35 years of victory, it's not just a catchphrase. It is something that is true and honest. Sure, are there wins and losses along the way? Of course there are. But the mass majority of what we have done has been securing victories for everyone from what you consider, I guess, to be a child in an elementary school all the way up to the President of the United States.
That's exactly correct. And all of those cases are equally important to our teams. And I want to thank our ACLJ members, especially our ACLJ champions, but also our ACLJ members for supporting us, to allowing us to do this kind of work. I remember working on this brief. It's been a while. I mean, this case took a long time to get decided. And the reality is we had the same team on this brief that was on our Supreme Court team. So it was those same lawyers, even though this was at an intermediate appellate court. But the idea that we have not only obtained a victory, but then get a citation in the opinion itself that talks about the negative impact, the deterrent effect on political activity and investment by this case, and then cites our brief. I mean, Logan, this is huge. I mean, I'm hoping that everyone that's listening to the broadcast or watching understands is that the reality is our brief gets cited. So then ask yourself this question: what if that brief wasn't filed? So that's what you got to realize. I mean, the courts can do so much, but that's why these briefs are so important. There are organizations that just do amicus briefs. Now, we do a lot more than that, but I mean, because it's that important.
I think that's good to show people, because I think you'll hear that, and a lot of times people do think of it maybe as a throwaway item, as they think of, an amicus brief, they're not really directly involved, they're just kind of getting involved in a way that they can see fit and they can fundraise on and all that. But here's the proof maybe to the biggest extent that is not the case.
100%. You're cited by a court on a case that has huge ramifications for the Constitution, the Eighth Amendment, the First Amendment, and the ability of people to do business. And then, of course, the presidency itself.
Let's go to Warren, who's calling, who again is an ACLJ champion, someone that gives on a monthly recurring basis, someone that says, I'm standing with the ACLJ, I want to set it and forget it, if you will. Let's go to Warren. Warren, you're on the air.
I just think it's awesome with Letitia James and all that she did in this judgment, that God is so true. He said he won't be mocked, and whatsoever a person sows, that will they reap. And don't judge, because the same thing you're judging, you're guilty of. And to see what they're finding out that she did in this lawfare, I just think it's fantastic in the judgment, and your guys' help in the whole thing with the amicus brief is awesome.
Thank you so much, Warren. And look, I feel like names like Letitia James and some of those are ones that I kind of was hoping we never would have to say again, but sometimes we get to say them on a good day.
In a good way,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, Warren.
Not for them.
Well, obviously, yeah. This was kind of the pinnacle of her career as the Attorney General of New York. This is what she ran on, and she was able to pull off. And now that huge judgment, that unprecedented judgment, is wiped out. Something that she was so proud of is gone. And that's another issue, that when you think about, not only was the judgment unprecedented, but the way that this law was used, this flexibility that allowed the Attorney General to go after businesses that may be fraudulently engaged in activities with consumers and everything. It's a consumer protection angle. So the Attorney General trying to keep the public trust. But what everyone argued from the beginning was that, and even the banks that testified, is like, there was no fraud here. There wasn't we aren't victims. The loans were repaid. We continued to do business with this organization, but yet they still had to go there. It looked like a show trial, the way cameras were brought in at the very beginning of it in order to showcase what was going on. The judge there loved his 15 minutes of fame, because most people nationally and around the world aren't talking about a lower court judge in the state of New York. But we've seen that all that has been undone, and the lawfare failed because President Trump was reelected. And it also failed because you're seeing that weaponizing the law doesn't end well. And that's the other key takeaway here. These aren't just important for President Trump. These are important for every American, that our system of laws is protected and upheld, and that our Constitution remains strong, and that state attorneys general don't get to run around and violate people's constitutional rights just because they don't like them politically.
ACLJ champion reporting for duty, and I say it that way because without you guys, I could not bear the news that I'm hearing. You're fighting for decency worldwide.
Hey, Jordan. Hey, Jay. I just want to let you know that I've supported ACLJ for 30 years and continue today. Thank you for all that you do.
Yes, I'm a small monthly donor for several years. I love that you explain the law according to the Constitution and that you fight for everybody, the big guy and the little guy.
I can't think of how many times the ACLJs were working over Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's while the rest of us were on vacation. Is there any other organization in our country that would be fighting for these kinds of things?
This country, I believe, is in an emergency. You've said it, Jay, but we are being attacked in the legal realm. We need brilliant and dedicated attorneys for what ails us. Let's make sure the ACLJ has the armor it needs through our giving to fight for us. Please join our family of supporters. Have the peace of mind to face the new year boldly.
Back to Seculo, I do want to hear from you, and there are a lot of you watching right now, so we're actually going to stick on this topic. I know a lot of you are tuning in to hear the breaking news, but I want your feedback on this. What do you think? Do you think the law got it right? Do you think they got it wrong? You can be on either side of this. I'm okay with it. Let's just discuss it. Let's talk it out. But Will, I guess maybe we need to reset a little bit.
That's right. And I think we should reset it by starting where this entire thing started. And that was with Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, brought a civil fraud case against President Trump and his Trump organization, family members, etc. And here's what she tweeted or posted on X when they,
I wasn't going to correct you.
when they got the judgment against President Trump on that bench trial, when the judge said you're liable for this. And we have that graphic. Throw it up for everyone. Letitia James just tweeted the number of the judgment.
I'm going to correct you.
$464,576,230.62.
My favorite Rent song.
No other context but that. That was the judgment put against them. And obviously, everyone said this is absurd. This is a historically high number. And then with interest, it was over $500 million. Well, this went to appeal. And what we see today, because we kept fighting in that span since February 23rd of 2024 to today, a lot of people forgot about it. There was an election. President Trump won.
I do think people think almost those things get wiped out.
And many of the criminal cases did go away. However, this did not. This was already a conviction in this civil case. And we now see that this 5-judge panel at the appellate division in New York, this is state court, remember, has overturned and gotten rid of that absurd judgment against the president. The ACLJ filed in this case. We were cited by one of the justices who wanted the entire thing thrown out. He agreed with get rid of that, but this entire case should be gone. And I'm going to read one portion of this justice in his concurring in part and dissenting in part, really taking up, he later quotes us directly from our brief, but really taking up the argument that this was political lawfare against the president, something we had been saying the whole time. And he says, this action essentially turns Section 6312 on its head. The leniency with which the courts have construed the requirement for pleading and proving fraud under Section 63, a leniency that has extended for the purpose of facilitating the use under provision to prevent the exploitation of unsophisticated customers, investors, and small businesses, is here being used by Attorney General Letitia James to apply Section 63 to a scenario to which the provision has never before been applied or even thought to apply. So he's saying the Attorney General being able to bring these actions in this case is meant for a specific purpose. It's meant to be to stop people from being exploited by businesses, banks, whatever, on unsophisticated customers, consumers, investors, etc. They don't have the resources. They're not savvy enough to understand the complexities of a fraud that's being brought upon them. Then he goes further and says the Attorney General in this case has utilized the flexibility afforded to her under this section to unwind complex financial transactions that were negotiated face-to-face and at arm's length between a privately held real estate organization and ultra-sophisticated banks, insurance companies, government entities, which were well advised by equally sophisticated lawyers, accountants, and other business professionals. Essentially
who never
saying,
issued a complaint,
right,
who never had a problem with any of this. This was all made up. They've said that the president and his organizations never missed a payment, never had any issues with the financial side of this. If there was a crime that you would say is what do they call that? Like a meaningless crime, a harmless crime,
right? Victimless crime.
Victimless crime. This would be it, which is a bank says, yes, here's a loan, and they repay that loan successfully.
Right. They keep saying that the Trump organization, enriched themselves by this fraud. You know who else made a lot of money off that? The banks that did business with him. There wasn't a true victim. They were trying to restore the public trust, et cetera, through using this. However, this judge, and I think that's once again where your dad was talking about, it bodes well for the future of this case, because getting this entirely wiped free, we know the reason she did this. It was a politically motivated attack on the president. And he lays it out there. We laid it out there in our brief. And also the majority of this court agreed that this is absurd, what they handed down against him. Over $500 million, unprecedented. The way this law was used was unprecedented. All of it shows what we said from the beginning. It was lawfare to try and take down President Trump. It was not trying to do something for the goodwill of the state of New York under this attorney general. And you know what? She has her own problems now with lying on loan documents alleged that are being investigated. As they always say, when they accuse you of doing something, when the left accuses you of doing something, they're probably doing that actually themselves.
Let's go, though, to Martin. Martin in North Carolina, watching it on YouTube. Martin, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I want to have one quick thing to it. Warren, I appreciate that. Remember, don't think so highly of yourself. God will exalt in due season. Now, from the brief that and your father had said something that brought a question in the comments you made, Jordan, and Will kind of clarified what I wanted to ask. We know that when you go to a bank, that appraisals are subjective.
Sure.
And everybody agrees who is the victim. But when you lie on a federal application, as what Ms. James is being accused of, would the victim be the banks because they're not making the money they should based on the information they were given? Would they the victims?
In theory, yes, I believe so, Martin.
Well, and specifically here, the Attorney General tried to use this is a public interest in pursuing this case to kind of ensure that the trust in the way that business is run is able to be upheld. And that's the theory that she went on. She wasn't even claiming the banks were victims there. In her case, yes, there is an argument that when you lie, it's just a crime to lie on mortgage documents that is statutorily put forward. But yeah, the victim would be a bank, because if you're getting more favorable loan term,
they give you so many of those papers to sign. I feel like they're trying to trick you.
Yeah, right. But it's like then you're maybe getting a lower rate than you would, so the bank is losing money. But also, if you're getting a loan that maybe should have gone to someone else, because banks only have a finite amount of money that they can lend out. So there are different ways to look at it. But when you're also talking about a mortgage, it's a much smaller level of potential. There's a lot more competitors for that rather than a highly sophisticated business loan. There truly were no victims in that.
Yep. Let's go to John. John is watching on Pluto TV. I assume that's on the Salem News Channel. Likely we're also on live. John, go ahead.
Trump has cut through it all, but I see one obstacle that we're all facing. When you're dealing with people like this, the Letitia James, go down the list. There's 100 of them. There's 1,000 of them. Within our Constitution, with them, just dissecting it to the way they want to fit and then erase the whole idea of our America, that falls into the category of treason. So I'm suggesting the task force.
Yeah, John, I think that is something that, look, the treason word I would say, until fairly recently, was being thrown around a little too willy-nilly, or sometimes wasn't being thrown around at all in legitimate course. Now we've seen, with even some of the moves, and we can even talk about a little what Tulsi Gabbard's been doing, those have become a bit more consistent. Now, I'm not sure if this would be considered treason. I feel like that's going a little far when you're talking about really a business, even though her role was to take down essentially the President of the United States. I think you get into a hairy area that I want to make sure that we don't end up biting you in return.
Well, and I think, once again, as you say, you have to be careful how far you go sometimes. Like with the impeachment against President
Absolutely.
Trump. They lowered the bar for impeachment in perpetuity. The Democrats did, because they impeached him over essentially nothing. We know the impeachment trial all too well.
Yeah, and the Republicans have, during the Biden era, they teased it a lot.
Right.
And then never went forward, because I was hopeful that really that was a fringe group who understood that this was a pathway that was not a good idea.
But, John, to your point, and I agree with you, Logan, I don't think that the lawfare that Letitia James did was per se treason, especially when you read the text of what treason is defined by the Constitution. Yeah. But I would lean more towards what Tulsi Gabbard has said, a treasonous conspiracy, when it was directed by heads of government to manipulate intelligence and things in order to wipe out the ingoing president who had been elected at that point, the president-elect, to try and effectively either get him out of office or get an indictment against him, as Adam Schiff was trying to do. Those things are more treasonous. That is trying to unseat the head of the United States government using lies, manipulations, and weaponization of intelligence.
Michelle in California, who is an ACLJ champion, because look, you need organizations like us to exist, and I truly believe that. I'm not just saying that because obviously I'm here. I'm one of the spokespeople for the organization. I'm here doing this show each and every day. But know that I find it incredibly important. When we hear these wins, it brings a smile to a lot of our faces here. Michelle, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So first of all, I want to say I am so honored to be a part of an organization that fights for good and righteousness, which you guys do. My question is, how does this case even come to fruition? Because Trump has no say in the valuation of his property. That is why the bank needs an official appraisal. So wouldn't that entity be the responsible party?
There was some information where there was property stated values, those kind of
right,
things.
Exactly. Yeah. And even the banks in the case were saying, obviously there's dispute over the valuation.
I mean,
that
they were throwing
is.
out numbers like Mar-a-Lago is worth $10 million, which was like, this is a monster resort.
And at the end of the day, though, the bank was even testifying like this didn't change at the end of the day if it were this or this, us giving the loan. That is why it was so egregious that they went forward with this and then secured through the judge, because remember, it wasn't a jury trial. It was a bench trial where the judge was the one who found the Trump organization guilty. So, Michelle, once again, the whole thing was not on the up and up from the beginning.